Hello, my little sleuths. Welcome to today's podcast episode. And today I have a very, very special guest with me. Her name is Fatima Barnes. Now, me and Fatima, we go way, way back. She has literally known me since the day my mother gave birth to me. So that's a very fun fact. I consider Fatima to be like a sibling to me, as I do many of my friends, but she is the only sibling besides my actual sibling who is older than me, who actually knew me before I was born. So that's a fun fact. Anyway, enough of me talking. Fatima, hi, how are you? We're gonna let her introduce herself.
Well, thank you for introducing people and telling them my age, essentially, that I am old,
She's not old. She's not old, bro.
that I've known her since she was born. No, but thank you for having me on here. You are truly like my little sister. Like we always say, same person, different
Different
font,
font.
literally. So I am so glad to be on your podcast because I am an avid listener. I get caught up every time and I tune in. So I'm excited to find out what we're going to talk about tonight, who we're going to talk about, and all the drama and zodiac surrounding it. Because, as you know, I love astrology and all that good stuff. So, thank you for having me.
Thank you so, so much, Fatima, for agreeing to do my podcast. And as you guys know, when my guests come on here, they know absolutely nothing about the cases that I have chosen to discuss with them. So Fatima is completely clueless. And today, I do have another special episode for you guys. Today's killer actually unalived 93 women. And
Ooh.
that sounds like a very staggering number because it is. If I am remembering correctly, I want to say he is the serial killer with the most kills. So, yeah, we're just going to
Whoa.
jump right into that. So, let's dive right in, kids. See you there. Before we get started in this episode, I do want to warn you guys that there are some very sensitive and graphic topics that will be talked about on this episode specifically. Um, it does get very deep, and I know some things can be a little sensitive to people, so I do just want to warn you. There's a graphic warning, there's sensitive subject warning, all kinds of warnings. So just be warned before you continue listening to this video. Thanks. Samuel's life was troubled right from the beginning. His disturbing childhood was enough to sound the alarm on the kind of man he was going to be. But is there any way that the world can be prepared for a man who ended up killing 93 women? For decades, he managed to slip past the authorities, committing one murder after another, and the bodies kept piling up. However, that isn't even the most chilling part of this case. This is the story of Samuel Little and his confessions to brutally strangling 93 women. So, Samuel Little, originally named Samuel McDowell, was born on June 7th, 1940, in a small town called Reynolds, Georgia. Now, this is the Serial Zodiac. So, I always like to talk about their zodiac signs. But with Samuel, while astrology is fun and popular with some people, it doesn't really explain why people do what they do, especially when it comes to serious stuff like crimes. Samuel Little was a Gemini. Geminis are usually
That
described
explains a
as
lot.
Geminis are usually described as adaptable, communicative, and
Isn't it
curious.
crazy? Listen, I love astrology. I want to know. I pull up the whole birth chart. He is probably crazy.
No, he 1000% is crazy.
93 women. Oh, yeah, he crazy.
But let's be real. These traits are way too broad to explain why someone would become a serial killer. In reality, criminal behavior is influenced by a mix of genetic, environmental, psychological, and social factors. For Samuel Little, his troubled upbringing, a history of criminal activity, and possible psychological issues are much more likely reasons for his actions than his zodiac sign.
It's always the upbringing. It's always the upbringing. They be raising serial killers out here. Like they really be. You could be raising a serial killer. And
So I know that you haven't listened to me and Megan's interview, but we talk a little bit about that in our interview on like nature versus nurture.
yeah, y'all
And
did. I know
so
what you're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah. So like I feel like sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Samuel, his childhood's a little dicey. But blaming his crimes on being a Gemini just really oversimplifies things, and it doesn't do justice to the complexity of human behavior. Now, he did have quite a rough start in life. Samuel said his mom, Bessie Mae Little, was a teenage prostitute, and when she had him, she left him shortly after. Some people think she might have given birth while she was in jail, but it's kind of hearsay.
Hmm.
According to the census from the year he was born, Bessie Mae worked as a maid, and his dad was a young guy named Paul McDowell, hence why he sometimes went by Samuel McDowell. His dad was only 19 years old at the time, and after Samuel was born, his family packed up and moved to Lorain, Ohio. Here, he was mostly raised by his grandmother, and the school wasn't exactly Samuel's thing. He went to Hawthorne Junior High School, but he struggled with both his behavior and his grades. And even as a kid, he had some pretty dark thoughts. He later said that he started having sexual fantasies about strangling women when he was just a child. Yeah.
So wait a minute. What? I mean, he was kind of doomed from the start. Mom might have birthed him in jail.
She was also a teenage prostitute. Let's not scoot past
Yeah,
that.
that's like another layer. And then, yeah, I mean, okay, it's not hard to tell how he got there. Got it. Okay.
So these fantasies started when he saw his kindergarten teacher touch her neck.
Huh? That's all
Yeah,
it took. Oh
yeah.
yeah, he's something ain't right in the head.
So he started having these fantasies about strangling women when he saw his kindergarten teacher touch her neck. And by the time he was a teenager, he was already heavily into true crime magazines, especially the ones that showed women being choked. Now, jumping ahead to 1965, things actually would take a turn for the worse, and Samuel would get caught breaking into a property in Omaha, Nebraska. As a result, he ended up in a juvenile detention center. On his booking card, his mom's whereabouts were listed as unknown. And in the late 1960s, Samuel moved down to Florida to live with his mom.
Mm, that's not a good recipe.
So during this time, he worked odd jobs like being a cemetery worker and an ambulance attendant. But Samuel couldn't stay out of trouble. He started traveling more and found himself on the wrong side of the law frequently. Over the years, he was arrested in 8 different states for a laundry list of crimes: driving under the influence, fraud, shoplifting, solicitation, armed robbery, aggravated assault, and even rape.
So he hadn't started killing people yet.
No.
Oh, and all this was before. Oh, okay.
So, despite his criminal lifestyle, Samuel claimed that he found a passion for boxing while in prison. He liked to call himself a former prize fighter, though who knows how true that really is. Soon you'll see that Samuel wasn't the kind of person who wanted to get better. In 1961, Samuel Little got himself into a big mess. He broke into a furniture store in Lorraine and got slapped with a 3-year prison sentence. He was out by 1964, but that didn't mean he was done with trouble. By 1965, he had been arrested 26 times
Oh my God.
across 11 different states.
Samuel.
Yeah. We're talking about theft, assault, fraud, and even attacks on government officials. Now, this this is kind of where it hits close to home for me and you, because he committed some of his crimes like right there on the coast.
In Mississippi?
Yeah,
Oh my God.
like
He,
Pascagoula, Gulfport, Mississippi.
how did he get away with getting in and out of jail so much
He was just
without the
over
three strikes?
it was just overlooked. So in that, like, during that time period, they didn't one they it wasn't like DNA very it wasn't very prevalent then, but
Mm,
also back in like the 60s and 70s, they didn't have they still today don't really have systems that like talk across like lines
mm.
per se, but it was even worse back then
I could see that.
because you can easily like give them a fake name and they would never really know.
I could see that. I could see
Yeah.
that.
So
Yeah.
like this is like the height of when most serial killers were born.
Yeah. That makes sense because it was
This
easier to
time.
get away with it. That's how he got away with 93. And so
Well,
he,
I wouldn't even say that's how he got away with 93. He got away with 93 because so I like it's not a secret that I like to like listen to other podcasts before I cover my podcast.
Mhm.
And one of the podcasts that I was listening to, they made a very good point, and I wish that I could remember the name of that podcast right now, but I'm just drawing a blank. Um, but I will link it in the at the bottom of this episode. But they made a very good point is that he was really able to get away with all of this because he was a criminal 100% of the time. So like whereas like Ted Bundy, he was pretending to be a good person. John Wayne Gacy, he was a
Yeah.
staple figure in the community. Samuel got away with this because 100% of the time he was a horrible fucking person.
Elaborate on that.
Like he's going in and out of jail and he hasn't even started killing people yet. This is his life. Like his life is assault, fraud, stealing. Like that's his entire life. So if you're already in and out of the system, of course you know how the system works. And he's
Mm.
been in and out of the system since he was a child.
Child. Okay. That make okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like he never pretended to be a good person. He was always I wouldn't he wasn't
Terrible.
always a horrible person, but he was always a terrible person. Like he ventured over into horrible person when he decided to start strangling people for
Yeah,
fun.
and I mean, he was already a little not wrapped too tight, just seeing your teacher touch your neck, and that's
He
enough.
was in kindergarten.
Yeah, that's a bit much.
But I mean, your mom was a prostitute, your dad was 19. They don't really
Mhm.
talk about his dad much after that, so I'm
Well,
assuming he wasn't really in his.
no,
No.
he was,
Yes.
for context, is this like, I'm asking what is his race or ethnicity? Um, just so they know. I'm doing the old school palm. Is he this or this? If you're listening, you know what I'm talking about with the palms and
Okay. Moving on. So, in 1982, things took a darker turn. Samuel was arrested in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and he was charged with the murder of 22-year-old Melinda Rose Lepre. She had gone missing in September of that year, but the grand jury decided not to indict him. While he was still under investigation, they shipped him off to Florida to stand trial for another murder. This time, it was 26-year-old Patricia Ann Mount, whose body had been found in September of 1982. Some witnesses swore they saw Samuel with her the night before she disappeared. However, the jury wasn't too convinced by the witnesses, so he was acquitted in January of 1984.
I
Now,
am over here with my mouth on the floor. Cause how?
now, after dodging these bullets, Samuel moved to California, settling around San Diego. But it didn't take long for trouble to find him again. In October of 1984, he was busted for kidnapping, beating, and strangling 22-year-old Lori Barrows. Now, Lori somehow survived, and a month later, the police found him in the back of his car with another unconscious woman who had been beaten and strangled at the same spot where he attacked Barrows. Now, we're going to pause right there for a second because Laurie, she was very brave. So, how she ended up getting out of this essentially was she played dead. So, Samuel had this thing where he liked to choke his victims and then he would let them breathe. They would most likely lose consciousness while he was choking them. He would let them go. They would regain consciousness and he would proceed to choke them again
What?
over and over and over until he eventually killed them. So during one of these times in between when he was choking her and letting go, she just pretended like she was dead. And he eventually kind of just dumped her body among some garbage bags. And yeah, he like just dumped her on the side of the road. And she sat there for a very, it said it was a long time, but whenever they talked about it, or like whenever she was talking about it, she said it was probably like 30, 45 minutes that she had sat there because she was so scared that he was watching her or he might come back to finish the job.
Right.
Like she was just scared. So she ended up just laying there pretending like she was dead for like 45 minutes.
That is traumatic AF.
Yeah. But so they basically caught him red handed. For these crimes, Samuel served 2.5 years in prison. He got out. You want me to tell you what happened?
Wait a minute. So he served 2.5 years in prison for that?
Would you like me to explain why he only served 2.5 years?
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
So he only served 2.5 years because these are Samuel's words, not mine. But do I feel like these words are true? Yes. Would I possibly use these words to explain the same situation? Absolutely not. Um, he only chose to kill prostitutes. And
Mm.
so, in his words, prostitutes were kind of like the throwaways of society. Like, if you go kill Marilyn Monroe, obviously people are that's gonna be all
Mhm.
over the news. But if you kill some random prostitute, like, that's also how he managed to not get caught
Yeah.
because he was killing people who, quote unquote, no one cared about.
And isn't that sad? Because they're still people. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
and I mean, like, they still have
But
family.
our society has done a really good job of like desensitizing themselves to people who they deem not worthy or throwaways in this society. So now that you've told me that, that explains why he
That's
only served 2.5 years and why he got away with 93 women, killing 93.
Well, it's also he only served 2.5 years also because if I'm remembering correctly, I don't believe Lori was a credible witness. I think she was on crack. Um yeah, I think Lori, listen, I'm sorry.
But one thing about it, I'm gonna
Guys,
just tell you,
guys, I apologize if I get some of these people mixed up. Um, some of this stuff just comes off the dome, and although I do a lot of research, there were 93 victims,
yeah.
and there were survivors, and there was more than one survivor. So sometimes they do get a little bit mixed up in my head, but I'm pretty sure she was the one that was on crack. Well, a lot of them were on crack, but I'm pretty sure she was
Right.
the one that,
In the
like,
80s, yeah.
yeah.
Prostitute. I'm just gonna be honest though, and I ain't trying to be funny, but I have a lot of crackheads in my family. Okay. I grew up seeing a lot of crackheads. That don't mean they be lying though. They may do some crazy stuff, but that don't mean they be lying either. They be actually telling the truth.
Yeah, but I want to say they caught her in a lie. Like, they caught her in an active lie.
I was trying to defend the crackheads.
And then also, in one of his cases that he kind of like got away with, he also, okay, so you make another good point actually. So either A, she was caught lying because one of them was like caught lying, and it wasn't even about this situation. It was about something completely different. But her story did stay the same, and that's ultimately what ended up getting him those 2 years. Like, her story about what happened to her did stay the same,
Mm.
but I want to say she was like caught lying on like a whole other case. And it was like it was something very, very weird. And so the jury was like, well, we don't know if we can believe her, da 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 da. But that's also what happens when you get a jury of your peers. Like, they may not find you guilty because they don't think that enough evidence was brought forth to
Mm.
prove your guilt. But also, um, Samuel had a girlfriend that would go in and also kind of testify on his behalf sometimes and be like, oh no, he was with me. Like, we were doing X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
Oh, she is a disgrace to women.
So, for those crimes, Samuel ended up serving 2.5 years in prison. And when he got out in February of 1987, he headed straight to Los Angeles and incredibly went on to commit at least 10 more murders. Fast forward to September 5th, 2012, and Samuel Little was finally caught at a homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky.
Wait a minute.
Why are we fast forwarding?
Wait a minute. Because you said 2012. Like, I remember 2012 very clearly. I was graduating college.
I
So, you
was
mean from
13.
before I was born to when I graduated
He was
college?
killing for about 40 years.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, he was killing for about 40 years.
That's, I'm speechless.
Yeah, I was 13.
That's crazy.
It's insane. Um, so in 2012, he was finally caught at a homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky. If you're listening to this and you were thinking to yourself, you didn't talk about half the murders that this man committed. That's because, give me a second. So this time he was extradited to California on a narcotics charge. But authorities were onto something bigger. They used DNA testing to link him to the murders of Linda Alford, who was killed on July 13th of 1987, and Guadalupe de Parta Apocta, who was killed on September 3rd of 1987, and Audrey Nelson Everett, who was killed on August 14th of 1989. Now, all of these women were found on the streets of LA. And by January 7th, 2013, he was formally charged in Los Angeles. As if this wasn't enough, a few months later, police announced that they were looking into his possible involvement in 36 more murders from the
Wow.
1980s that have been unsolved until then. The investigation even reopened the case of Melinda Rose LaPree's murder in Mississippi. All in all, Samuel was eventually linked to 93 murders of women across the United States through various states, which is crazy to imagine. But
Because he
if
got
you
away
think,
with it so many times. I mean, he just kept doing it. He didn't go to jail.
yeah, the other podcast that I was listening to, I believe that they said his total time spent in jail, like while he was like in the middle of murdering people, it was like 10 years. Like all together. Like it wasn't even a consecutive 10 years. It was like sporadically like 10 years. Over the time of like all his sentences added together, it equaled up to like it was either 10 years or like less than 10 years.
Mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm.
But if you think that's where the drama ended, think again. Because this is actually where Samuel's story truly begins.
Begins. You mean like it's about to start after we done got through 93 murders? We done went to 2012. It's about to
Yeah.
begin.
So we're
Oh,
starting his story because Samuel has nothing to lose after he's been committed of after he's been we'll see. He
okay.
doesn't have anything to lose anymore, and they don't know half of what he's did, and so Samuel starts to spill the beans.
Ooh.
Yeah, they're not even like they don't even know half of they're like scratching the surface of what they think he's done.
Whoa. Whoa.
And spoiler alert, Samuel has an amazing memory. So
Usually they do. The crazy ones, they do.
he he has an amazing memory. So it's okay. We're gonna continue. In September 2014, Samuel Little was put on trial for the murders of Linda Alford, Audrey Nelson, and Guadalupe de Parta Apoca. The prosecution brought out the DNA evidence and testimonies from various people who had been attacked by Samuel throughout his life of crime. On September 25th, 2014, the jury found him guilty and sentenced him to life in prison without any chance of parole. Even as the verdict was being read, Samuel kept on insisting that he was innocent. But, of course, the evidence spoke for itself. 4 years later, Samuel started to confess to his crimes. And the true picture of the case finally emerged. On November 9th, 2018, Samuel Little confessed to strangling Melissa Thomas back in 1996. Just a few days later, on November 13th, he was charged with the 1994 murder of Denise Christie Brothers in Odessa, Texas. He had confessed to he had confessed to this crime to a Texas Ranger earlier in May of 2018. On December 13th, Samuel pleaded guilty to murdering Denise Christie brothers and got another life sentence added to his record. Around this time, the authorities of Ector County, Texas, and Wise County, Texas, revealed that Samuel had confessed to killing dozens of women. They believed he might have committed more than 90 murders across 14 states between 1970 and 2005. That's a staggering number.
Wait a minute. That's just through 2005. That don't even count that he didn't even get arrested till 2012.
Well, 2005, he had to kind of stop because he was getting old.
Good point.
I mean,
Yeah.
he was getting old, so he
So he
around
slowed
2005,
down.
he didn't slow down. He literally stopped because he so in his prime, Samuel Little was this 6 foot something guy. He literally said himself that he could have been a prize fighter. So even somebody like me probably didn't have a chance against him. And
Mm.
I ain't no small girl. So even somebody bigger like me, even with the amount of muscle and stuff that I have, he probably still would have easily overpowered me. I
Hmm.
probably could have got a good kick in or two because I do bench press a lot. But me fighting him off with my arms, not a thing.
Oh yeah, I have
Um,
no strength in my
yeah,
lower body.
no
No,
upper body strength.
me neither. None whatsoever.
So it makes sense that he was able to easily overpower these people, but it also makes sense that as time goes on, you're getting older, you're slowing down. And if I'm not mistaken, I know by the time he started confessing, he was in a wheelchair, but
Mm.
I want to say by the time they caught him, he was in a wheelchair, or either he went in a he was put in a wheelchair shortly after that. So he wasn't really in a place to
So,
keep on fighting.
so I guess my thing is, what did he do to? Because that urge just doesn't go away when you've
It
been doing
didn't.
something like that. So,
It did.
I wonder what he would do
He
to.
relived it.
Yeah, that's
No, I'm
wild.
telling you, he relived
Oh,
it.
oh,
Remember when I said he has a great memory? He
yes.
just relived it over and over and over
Oh,
again in his head.
that's sick.
Yeah. That's what he did to combat with old age. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
So, on November 15th, 2018, the Russell County District Attorney in Alabama announced that Samuel had confessed to the 1979 murder of 23-year-old Brenda Alexander. Her body had been found in Phoenix City, Alabama. Just a day later, on November 16th, sheriffs in Macon, Georgia, shared that Samuel had credibly confessed to 2 more murders: an unidentified woman in 1977 and an 18-year-old Fredona Smith in 1982.
Question: did he keep something of the victims? You know how most serial killers
No,
collect things?
no,
Just his memory.
he kept a very vivid memory.
Oh.
So he was able to identify an unidentified woman because he drew them pictures of each and every one of his victims.
Oh, so he did kind of keep something.
No, 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 no.
Oh no, he drew
He
them
drew them
from his
pictures
memory.
from his memory of
Ah.
each one of his 93 victims. He didn't even know some of their names. I don't I can't remember if we're going to get into this later in the podcast, but it was literally one of his victims. He couldn't remember her name, but he remembered what he took her on a date before he killed her. He remembered exactly what she ordered before he killed her. And that's how they identified her body, based off what her stomach contents was when she was found.
Oh wow. Okay.
So some of them he knew their names, but a lot of them he didn't. And some of them, when he drew pictures of them, the pictures were like actually very accurate.
To the
Like,
people
I
that
wouldn't say he's like an artiste,
right.
but you can also, so if I can find some of the pictures, guys, I'll also link that down in the description too. Because he did draw, the pictures were, they were decent.
It was enough for them to say, "Oh, that's somebody that's been missing in this area."
Yeah, it was enough for them to, you know how like they bring in sketch artists
Mhm,
sometimes to get composite
mhm,
sketches,
mm,
and then they like kind of blast those photos
mhm.
around the area. It was enough for them to be able to blast the photo around the area and be like, "Have you? Do you know this person?"
Wow. Okay.
So on November 16th, sheriffs in Macon, Georgia shared that he had credibly confessed to two more murders, an unidentified woman in 1977 and an 18-year-old Fredona Smith in 1982. Then, in the fall of 2018, Samuel came clean about the 1982 murder of 55-year-old Dorothy Richards and the 1996 murder of 40-year-old Daisy McGuire, both of whom were found in Huma, Louisiana. I've never heard of that place before,
Me
but
neither.
that's where they were found. And it keeps going. Now, a lot of you at home are probably wondering, Carly, why the fuck did he just start confessing to shit? Good question, right? Samuel started confessing to things because he was out of chances to get parole. So
Oh,
he really didn't have shit else to lose.
he didn't
If you
have nothing
just,
to lose.
yeah, he
Like
didn't
you
have,
said.
and he made a deal with them that um as long as they didn't give him the death penalty and they just kept adding on life sentences, which he was already gonna spend life in jail, um he would just tell them whatever they wanted to know.
Mm.
Yeah, it was like I would describe it as like just like me and you talking right now. Like they would just go in there, how you doing? How was your day? And then he would get to confessing murders.
Wow.
And he had like no remorse either. Like he wasn't sorry that he did it. He talked about it with like, you can
Pride.
hear it in his voice on, so there are confession tapes on YouTube, and I will also try to link some of those in the description too. But you can hear it in his voice. Like he's like proud of what he did. Like he's not like he he
He's a-
don't regret it.
wow.
So it keeps going.
Wow.
On November 19th, 2018, the sheriff in Harrison County, Mississippi, Troy
Mm.
Peterson, said that Samuel had confessed to strangling 36-year-old Julia Critchfield back in 1978 and dumping her body off a cliff in the Gulfport area.
Wow. And with us having been in that area,
I ain't never
mm,
seen no cliff in Gulfport. He was in
nah.
the trenches in Gulfport.
Yeah, now I definitely ain't seen no cliff.
I ain't
I'm
never
thinking
seen
about
no cliff
yeah,
in
I was thinking about
Gulfport.
the pier at the beach. So I don't know
He
why
said
that's
it
in
says
my
a
bed.
cliff. It doesn't say a. It didn't say a pier.
Oh
It said a
yeah, I ain't
cliff.
never seen no clear in
I ain't never seen
no
a cliff
port.
either.
Yeah, no cliff in Gulfport.
He was in trenches of Gulfport. I don't know. You know what though? It kind of does make sense. So for context, guys, I grew up in Mississippi, and where I grew up at, I grew up. I'm not gonna tell y'all where I grew up at. You don't need to know all that. Anyway,
They wouldn't know what it is, no way.
I grew up in the country in Mississippi. Sometimes you can hear it, sometimes you can't. But I grew up in the country in Mississippi, and for context, our house had two trails in the yard. There was one in the front yard and one in the backyard. And I can't remember if it was the front yard or the backyard trail that I took. But one day when I was like younger, we had four-wheelers and stuff. One day when I was younger, I like almost drove off of a cliff in one of these trails.
Hmm.
And I didn't even know Mississippi had stuff like that. It was like a giant hole, and it just had like little mountains in it. But it was pretty far down. Like if I would have fell down there, I don't
Yeah.
know. Somebody would have had to call 911.
Mhm.
It was pretty far down. I will say that. And it was just like a straight drop off too. So, I don't know if that was real or if it was a fever dream, but I do remember seeing that in my childhood. So there could have
Quite
been cliffs
possible
in
it would have been
Gulfport.
a cliff
I'm
because
not
where we
saying it
grew up
wasn't, but I
from.
ain't never seen one. But I also have only ever been to like casinos, like Luxie area in Gulfport,
Yeah,
because Gulfport's not a desirable place to go. Don't get in the water if you go.
trying
That's my
to.
advice. Anyway, back to Samuel. So, he confessed to killing 36-year-old Julia Critchfield back in 1978 and dumping her body off a cliff in the Gulfport area. The next day, law enforcement in Lee County, Mississippi, announced that Samuel had admitted to killing 46-year-old Nancy Carol Stevens in Tupelo, Mississippi in 2005. They plan to take this case to the grand jury in January of 2019. Ooh, y'all, words are real hard right now. By November 21st, 2018, authorities in Richland County, South Carolina, said Samuel had confessed to murdering 19-year-old Evelyn Weston near Fort Jackson, South Carolina, in 1978. He also admitted to killing 20-year-old Rosie Hill in Marion County, Florida, in 1982.
So he didn't have any age preference at all, did he?
He didn't have any age preference. He really just
Killed what he
wanted
killed.
them to have a nice neck. You know,
Oh.
it wasn't like an age thing, it wasn't a race thing. As if he saw you and you had like a pretty neck, you're a victim.
Oh, wow. I'm glad I ain't got no
Yeah.
neck.
Moving on. On November 27th, 2018, the FBI made a big announcement. They had a team from their Violent Criminal Apprehension Program working hard to verify Samuel Little's confessions. By then, they had confirmed 34 of them, and they were busy matching the rest to known murders or suspicious deaths. Now, can't remember if we're going to get into this, but another way that Samuel really got away with a lot of these murders is all of them wasn't classified as a murder when they died.
Oh,
You
really?
find a random person, prostitute, her body's been sitting there for a while. Oh, she
They
OD, like, because you can't see. I mean, like,
because since he's
strangulation
choking
marks.
them, yeah.
Yeah,
That
like it wasn't like he was breaking their necks. He was strangling them, cutting off.
mhm,
He was just cutting off their air, and
mhm.
so it's not like it was like breaking anything. And once your body breaks down, you don't have those. You don't have those signs of strangulation anymore. Like they really don't know how you died.
And if they didn't think to, why would they think they thought she just OD'd? Why would they think to just do an autopsy and go that deep
Well, I
into
mean,
it
even if you do an autopsy at that point, well, I
after?
mean,
I don't know how that works.
if you have, well, if you can, like, I forgot what this is called, but you can, it's like soft tissue right here that can bruise if you do an autopsy, but a lot of the times they weren't even really doing
Yeah,
autopsies.
because it's like in their minds, and this is not right, but in their minds, it's like this is just a random quote unquote prostitute who ain't no telling what she got into. In their minds, it's like, eh, that's
Like,
really
that's
sad.
just it's a hazard of the job, essentially. Like,
Exactly.
you're on drugs, you're exposing yourself to a high risk life. It's just a
Yeah.
hazard of the job.
Yeah.
Like,
Eh,
to them, some of them, I want to say it was like even listed as natural causes. So,
Oh, wow. Do you think there's a link between his mother being a prostitute and why he chose them as victims?
Possibly. I think that he just hated women because he felt abandoned by his mom.
Mom. That's
Yeah.
what I'm
I
thinking.
think
Sounds
he
like
just
mommy issues.
simply hated women because he was abandoned by her, and her being a prostitute just kind of was like the icing on the cake.
Mhm. Hmm. Okay.
But I also just genuinely think he went for prostitutes because he knew he wouldn't get caught.
Get caught. Yeah. Probably a mixture of both.
Yeah. So at that point in 2018, they had confirmed 34 of his murders, and they were busy matching the rest to known murders or suspicious deaths. Samuel started revealing things because he wanted to transfer out of Los Angeles County Prison where he was being held. He even confessed to an old cold case in Prince George's County, Maryland. This case was one of only 2 homicides in that county with unidentified victims, so it was a pretty big deal.
Mm.
Moving into December of 2018, Samuel was indicted for another murder. This time, it was for strangling Linda Sue Boards, a 23-year-old, to death in May of 1981 in Warren County, Kentucky. Her body was discovered on May 15th, 1981, near US Route 68. Also in December, one of his victims from back in 1975 was finally identified. She was Martha Cunningham from Knox County, Tennessee, and she was 34 years old when Samuel killed her.
Mm.
Then in 2019, the confessions kept coming. On May 31st of 2019, prosecutors in, I'm going to butcher this, Cahoga, Cuyahoga County, Ohio, hit Samuel with more charges. 4 counts of aggravated murder, 6 counts of kidnapping. These charges were for the murders of Mary Jo Payton in 1984 and Rose Evans in 1991 in Cleveland. Both women had been strangled and their bodies dumped. Rose Evans was 32 when she was killed and was found on August 24th of 1991 in a vacant lot on East 39th Street. She had left her hometown in Bingham, New York, when she was just 17. The coroner, Elizabeth Kay, confirmed she had been strangled.
Mm.
Mary Jo's case was a bit trickier. An anthropologist had to create a model of her face because she remained unidentified until 1992. That's when Cleveland put her thumbprint into the FBI database and finally got a match. Samuel had picked her up at a bar near East 105 and Elucid Avenues. I think that's how you pronounce it. He described her as a short, plump woman in her 20s with brown hair. But wait, there's more. Samuel also confessed to killing another woman in Cleveland back in 1977 or 1978. This woman's body was found on March 18th of 1983 in Willoughby Hills, Ohio. According to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, she was likely Black and between 17 and 35 years old. Her body had been dumped down a grassy slope near a fence in a wooded area just off Interstate 271. By the time a man walking his dog found her, only her skeleton, some clothes, and jewelry remained.
Yeah, because that was a pretty big this time period from by the time they found her body and the time she was killed. So
Yes,
yeah,
it was
So that would make sense.
78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83. It's about 5 years.
Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah, and it was 5 or 6 because he can't remember if he killed her in 77 or 78. It's not funny, guys. It's not funny. I'm not laughing because of that. I'm laughing because
That's how you cope.
he literally was like, oh, I can't remember if I killed her in 77 or 78. Like, god damn, you were killing that many fucking people, bitch.
Right. And he said it so damn
He be saying it so casually.
casually, like it's just another Tuesday for me, you know.
No, literally, it was the day she literally lost her life. But okay, whatever.
Wow.
He
Mm.
then confessed to killing one woman in Akron, Ohio, two women in Cincinnati, and another woman he met in Columbus, and then dumped her body in Kentucky. Now, out of the two women he killed in Cincinnati, one was identified as Anna Stewart. Anna Stewart was a 33-year-old when she was last seen on October 6th, 1981. She had gotten out of a cab at General Hospital, which is now the University of Cincinnati Academic Health Center, to visit her sister. Tragically, she was killed just a few days later on October 11th. The other woman he killed in Cincinnati remains a bit of a mystery. Samuel wasn't clear about her age or when exactly he killed her, but it was somewhere between 1980 and 1999.
Oh,
She's referred to as Jane Doe because her identity is still unknown. What Samuel did remember was that she was black, slender, wore glasses, and lived in the Over the Rhine neighborhood of Cincinnati with a heavy female Hispanic. Samuel left her body beside a cigarette billboard in Ohio.
and they didn't
Fast
find.
forward,
Oh,
I think they did find her. They just didn't know who she was. So she
okay.
was found, they just didn't know who she was. So he left her body beside a cigarette billboard in Ohio. And fast forward to June 7th, 2019, and Samuel was indicted in Hamilton County, Ohio, for murdering these two women in Cincinnati. But that's not all. Samuel had a unique way of remembering his victims. He drew portraits of many of the women he killed. The
Mm.
FBI released these portraits to the public, hoping someone might recognize the women and help some cold cases. At least one of these drawings did just that, solving a cold case in Akron, Ohio. In November of 2020, Samuel confessed to two more murders in Florida. In a twist of fate, one of these confessions revealed that another man had been wrongfully convicted of that crime. And
Oh,
then and then on April 22nd, 2022, another one of Samuel's victims were finally identified. A woman he killed in Memphis, Tennessee, whose body was found on the Arkansas side of the Mississippi River back in 1990, was identified as 30-year-old Zena Marie Jones. It took over 3 decades, but at least her family has some closure.
closure. Yeah.
Out of all of these confessions, only a few victims were actually connected to the crimes. I think that this is a really good time to say that some of these drawings, and like I said earlier, I will link them below, but some of these victims are still unidentified. So if you have any information or you see one of the pictures and it looks like someone you might know, I will also link down in the description on how you can also contact the FBI with any information that you may have because they are still identifying some of his victims. So if you have any information or you know anything about any of the victims that you see in any of the portraits, feel free to reach out to the FBI because they are still trying to identify some of them. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Mm, mm, mm. So this really hits home for me because a lot of the ages that you're saying are ages that are close to my age. A lot of the locations and the places that you're naming are places that I've lived or I've been to or I've lived nearby. Like I worked in West Memphis, Arkansas. I lived in Memphis. I was a 30-year old in Memphis. Like I live near Gulfport, Mississippi. Went to Gulfport all the time. I was born and raised half of my childhood in California. So it really hits. This feels really close to home.
Yeah. When I was first reading about this, I was like, oh my gosh, like he killed people in Gulfport and Pascagoula and Jackson.
Yes.
And I was like, that's insane. Like, I also think that um a bigger part of me really like I feel for the victims' families
Hmm.
because I know that you follow me on YouTube, but I don't know if everyone, I mean, not YouTube, on Instagram, but I don't know if everyone here follows me on Instagram. But I posted like a couple of days ago, like, when does the victim count go from being a tragedy to just simply like a statistic? Because
Hmm.
yes, 93 victims is a lot of people. But whenever you say the words, oh, 93 victims out loud, you don't feel bad for each one of those individual people because you didn't know them.
Hmm.
But when you say someone like Anna Nicole Smith died, the whole world is in an uproar because one, they know her, and two, it's one person.
Right.
Nobody, like, and I know that this sounds mean, but whenever your victim count just gets to a certain number, it's like people forget that those are
Those are
individuals.
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true.
So he claimed she was a prostitute, like I said, 28 or 29. He had picked her up at a motel in Memphis. And Samuel choked her in his car as the Memphis police drove by and dropped her body into the river after crossing into Arkansas and stopping at a bridge. He was found guilty of her murder on August 23rd, 2019. Her family recognized her from Samuel's sketch, and she was officially identified in April of 2022.
Mm. Mm.
So, if I'm not mistaken again, I believe that this particular victim is the one that he said that he had a very close call with. So, Samuel, like I said earlier, was no stranger to the law, but during one of the confession tapes, they asked him like, "Oh, like what was the closest you were ever to be like you had ever been to being caught?" And he literally says, well, one time I got essentially like pulled over while, or like he had gotten caught in the middle of like strangling someone. The lady was dead in the back seat, dead. The officer, he gets out the car. Samuel gets out the car. He's dipping his pants up. He's like, "Oh, officer, me and my old lady, we were just having some fun. Like, we had been arguing. We were just basically like having makeup sex." The officer looks in the back of the car. He sees the girl. She's like naked. And so I guess he like had like this embarrassment moment like, "Oh, I just walked in on like him and his wife just having sex." And he was like, "All right, just don't do it again. Bye."
Oh no, no, no. Because see, did she look she was dead?
She was dead.
And you didn't as a police he need his badge
Yeah.
completely
She was dead.
taken.
But I mean, I see it from that point of view, but I can also see it from his point of view of like, "Oh, like I just rolled up on them. They were just having sex. Like, all right, don't
But
do it
if she
again."
was it'd be
I
one
don't think she looked like that though.
oh.
I think it was literally like the way that he kind of described it is like her like legs were open. Like, she was just naked. And he probably was so much in shock of seeing just a naked woman sitting there to where,
Mhm.
like, he didn't register that, like, he saw a dead, like, the body looked like it was dead.
Yeah, I guess I can see that perspective. I wonder how he feels now once she was, like, identified and he told the story, because I know he didn't forget that story. That's not something you forget.
Oh, no, it's not. So he had been caught one time like that, similarly.
Mhm.
So it was another time where he was actually in the middle of choking a lady and she was unconscious, and they caught him in a very similar situation, getting out of the car, pulling his pants up, and he was like, "Oh, sorry, that was my old lady. Me and her just had a fight, and we were just having some makeup sex." And the officer looked in the car and he was like, "That lady looks like she did." But at that point, she had like blood running down her face. So like the officer was like, "She looks like she's dead." He arrested Samuel, put him in the back of the car, and they got the lady, and they were able to resuscitate her.
And they still didn't did he go to jail?
That was the case
Oh, that was the
where
one.
I was telling you that she wasn't a reliable witness.
Mm.
So, like, I think one of them was, like, on crack or something, and then the other one had, like, lied on the stand or something. It was something, like, weird as to, like, why he got off with
It
such a
was like
light
a
sentence.
technical it had to be a
Yeah,
technicality,
because like,
because
the
if I'm
first
almost
lady,
dead, I don't care what I say or lie about. Like, you can't refute that, you know?
well, so he couldn't refute her, but there was also another victim who had gotten away, the lady who pretended like she was dead.
Mhm.
She gave them an amazing description of his car, but it was his word against hers. And you also, like, even if they would have found DNA on her, she's a prostitute. He easily could have been like, "Oh, well, I paid her. We had sex earlier, and that's why my DNA is on her." Like, everything would have been easily explainable away.
Mm, mm.
So it was like him versus her. And the other witness, she just wasn't very credible. So he ended up getting a pat on the back. I mean, a slap on the wrist.
Wow.
Yeah. Then there's Rose Evans, who was 32 when she was murdered in Cleveland, Ohio, around August 24th, 1991. Samuel met Evans while driving and offered her a ride. He then took her to an abandoned area, strangled her in his car, and dumped her body in a lot, covering it with two tires. He was convicted of her murder on August 23rd, 2019.
Mm, mm.
And lastly, now this is the last confession that he admitted to, and they actually like charged him for it. Because they didn't charge him with very many, but at you know, not gonna get into it right now. Lastly, there was Denise Christie Brothers. She was a 32-year-old mother of two who was found dead in Odessa, Texas on February 2nd, 1994. Brothers had been reported missing on January 1st of 1944. District Attorney Bobby Bland said she had been strangled. Samuel pleaded guilty to her murder and received his fourth life sentence in December on the 13th of 2008. However, according to Samuel's confessions, there were some bodies that were simply never found.
Mm, mm, mm.
Now, Samuel had many other confessions, a lot of which he explained in great detail. One of them was from back in 1971 or 1972. Samuel recalled meeting this attractive young transgender black woman in Miami. He thought her name was Marianne or maybe Marina, and she was around 18 or 19 years old, standing at about 5'6" to 5'7" and weighing roughly around 140 pounds. They first crossed paths at a bar called The Pool or Pool Palace near 17th Avenue. A few days later, they bumped into each other again at another bar in Overtown, and this time Samuel offered to give her a ride home. Marianne lived with several roommates in an area between Brownsville and Liberty City. When they got to her place, one of her roommates asked them to grab a can of shaving cream. So they hopped back into Samuel's gold four-door Pontiac Lemons. I don't know what that is. And I'm going to Google it later. Don't worry. And took off. Samuel drove Marianne through, I actually think it's Mariana. Mariana drove Mariana north on Highway 27 and eventually killed her on a driveway, possibly near a sugarcane field. Afterward, he continued driving down Highway 27 into the Everglades. He turned onto a dirt road that led to a river or a swamp and dragged Marina's body about 200 yards into the thick, muddy water. Samuel doesn't think her body was ever found. Jumping ahead to the early 90s, Samuel recalled another encounter. This time it was with a black woman in a transient area of Samuel Rock, Arkansas. Sometime between 1992 and 1994, he remembered it being cold, possibly even snowing when they met, and this woman was about 24 years old, 5'5" to 5'7", tall, around 200 pounds. They hung out off and on for about 3 days, even getting into a bit of trouble together. They shoplifted some stuff and sold the goods. Samuel remembered getting arrested for shoplifting at a Kroger grocery store in North Samuel Rock. Indeed, records confirm that he was arrested by the North Samuel Rock police for shoplifting at a Kroger on April 20th of 1994. After being held for about 3 hours, Samuel was released to move his vehicle, a 1978 yellow Cadillac El Dorado, off the grocery store's property. When he got back to his car, the young woman was sleeping inside. Samuel drove her to meet her ex-boyfriend, a guy called Bear, who Samuel believes is now dead. Then he took her back to her place, and the next day they drove together towards Benton or Bentonville, Arkansas, outside of Samuel Rock. Samuel took a dirt road and strangled the woman to death.
Ain't that where Walmart at? Headquarters,
I think
Bentonville,
so.
Arkansas. My
I think
bad.
so.
That was really random, but it just made me think of Walmart.
No, the randomest thing is that he hung out with this woman for like 3 days and actually
Bitch,
got to know her and then murdered her.
and then yeah, I was thinking that I was like, wait a minute,
Yeah, he like literally hung
they
out with her for like
actually
a
went
while
places.
and
Yeah,
then killed her.
dang, that dude ain't got no heart.
She had a pretty neck. He placed her body on a pile of branches and old corn stalks, possibly in or near a cornfield. Samuel thinks her name might have been Ruth and that her mother lived in North Samuel Rock. Then around 1984, during the summertime, Samuel was cruising in his Lincoln Colonial Mark III from Lorain, Ohio to Cincinnati. And on his way, he encountered a young white woman about 25 years old outside of the strip club. He remembered her pretty vividly. She was about 5'6" to 5'7", weighing between 130 and 170 pounds, with short blonde hair and blue eyes. She had this hippie vibe going on.
Mm-hmm.
This woman approached Samuel and asked for a ride to Miami, Florida, mentioning that her mother lived there. So off they went, heading south on Interstate 75. When they reached Cincinnati, they hung out downtown on Vine Street for a bit. After that, they continued their journey, crossing the river into northern Kentucky. Samuel described driving to a hilly area not far from I-75. He took a small dirt road up to the top of a Samuel round hill where he strangled the woman in the back seat of his car and left her body there.
Mm, mm, mm.
Moving on to 1993, Samuel was on another grim road trip, and this time in his 1978 yellow Cadillac Eldorado, heading to Los Angeles. In Las Vegas, on either Owens Avenue or Jackson Street, he met a thin, dark skinned black woman around 40 years old, 5'5", and weighing about 110 to 120 pounds. Samuel remembered that she had naturally short hair but wore a long haired wig. She even pointed out her son to him, a young black man around 19 or 23 years old.
That's sad.
Samuel took this woman to a motel room and tragically strangled her to death. He then put her body in the trunk of his car and drove to the outskirts of Las Vegas on a remote road. He rolled her body down a steep slope and tossed her clothes further down the road. He was pretty certain her body was never found. Going back to 1982, Samuel recounted another murder, this time in New Orleans. He met a black woman in her early 30s to 40s, about 5'8" or 5'9", and weighing around 160 pounds. She had honey-colored brown skin and medium-length straight hair. Samuel remembered she was wearing a pretty dress with buttons down the front. They met at a club where she was attending a birthday party with friends and one of her two sisters.
Imagine you just going to a birthday party with your friends
And your sister.
and your sister.
After the party, Samuel and the woman left his Lincoln Continental Mark III. This man done had a lot of cars. I know that's not the point
I
of this.
think he be stealing them. You don't think he be stealing them?
I don't know, but I'm sitting over here. I'm like, bro, we done talked about 5 different cars over here.
I
I'm
think he was
sorry.
stolen.
I'm sorry, guys. That was a tangent. I'm just sitting over here. I'm like, you didn't even have a job.
I think he stealing them cars, especially that
I have a
Cadillac.
job, and you done
You
had
know
more
how
cars
big
than me.
it was? Definitely the Cadillac, because it's the Cadillac that's giving it away for me that he stole that, because you know how big of a deal it was during that time to be driving a Cadillac. It was like, you remember on Dreamgirls, got me a Cadillac, Cadillac, Cadillac.
I'm like, where did you
It's a
find the
big.
time to have all these damn?
He ain't had no Cadillac money out of him.
You literally didn't have a job.
Yeah, he ain't had no Cadillac money. He was stealing them cars.
So after the party, Samuel and the woman left in his Lincoln Continental Mark III. The woman mentioned she lived with her sickly mother, possibly an invalid, and even gave Samuel the keys to her house.
Oh.
He drove her to the Samuel Woods exit off of I-10, turned down a dirt road along a canal that was being dredged, and then in a horrifying turn, pulled her towards the canal and killed her. Afterward, he drove back to his motel in Pascagoula, Mississippi.
And you know that ain't too far of a drive for those that don't understand. That's what, like, hour and a half, 2 hours.
It's not that long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Crazy.
That girl was just on trying to enjoy the birthday party. But she shouldn't have gave that man no. So she gave him the keys?
Possibly.
Possible.
Yeah, she possibly. I don't know if he ever went to the house and stole anything, but she might have gave him. It doesn't say it in here, but he literally he remembered strangling them. He remembered what it felt like to strangle them and what it was like to basically feel the life going out of them. but he wouldn't remember like bigger details. Like literally in one of the confessions, he's like, "Oh, she was like 20 to 50."
Oh,
That's a big
that's a big
age
range.
range.
Some of the ones when you were saying that earlier, when they were like they might have been 17 to 52, I'm like, well, damn, that is a
It's
pretty
a big
big
age difference. Like
range.
you couldn't remember. That's a big age difference.
Guess he remembered what he wanted to remember. Nasty.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Samuel died on December 30th, 2020, in a hospital in the Los Angeles County area. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation didn't specify the cause of death, but it's known that Little had several health issues, including diabetes and heart problems. Jillian learned about Samuel's death during COVID. She received a text early in the morning from a detective on the case, followed by a call informing her that Samuel had died and that she was listed as his next of kin. I mean, it makes sense. That was the last person that he had been in contact with, and he most likely didn't have any family members because I think he had a sister, but I mean, she was either just as old as him or had already died. So, um, so he had left her listed as his next of kin, and she felt a mix of relief and sadness, knowing that it was the end of any new information, but also a burden lifted from her and her family.
I'm sure that was a lot on her family though. Like you for it's if you think about it, it has to be hard sometimes to not bring that kind of work home with you. That's the kind of work that really consumes you. I'm sure her family is relieved just as much because that again, that's the kind of work that it's more than just I do my work and go home.
I mean,
Nah, the fact that
even
she
with
was
the
next of kin.
podcast, I
Yeah.
even like with my podcast, I'll literally find myself like up at like 3 o'clock in the morning searching some of my like
Mm-hmm.
like some of my people. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm like, I can only imagine if I had these people sitting in front of me and I was able to get that wealth of information from them, how much it would consume me. Because
Mm-hmm.
just trying to find the information that I want to find, that consumes me a lot of times. So I could
Mm-hmm.
really only imagine opening up this box of worms and it not consuming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like he got arrested for like two murders, and then they were like, "Oh, well he might be connected to 3 dozen." And then they were like, "Oh, well actually he's confessing to 93 and it doesn't sound like he's lying because he's
Mm-mm.
able to recall details."
And then the fact that they went back and found some of those people as a
And the fact
result.
that you're able to verify the things that he
Mm-hmm.
is also saying, like
Cold
even if you
cases.
didn't find the body, he was like, "Oh yeah, I was arrested this date. I murdered her here. Y'all probably never found her."
Mm-hmm. That's wild.
The amount of his victims that were literally probably never found is sad.
Mm-hmm. It really is.
Yeah.
But but at the same token though, I'm glad to hear like because he did confess to so many, he could have just stuck to the ones he was charged with.
But he was never
But
going to do that.
nah, because again, we know what it's about for him. That's that immortalization. But at least those families were able to get connected and figure out what happened. You know, imagine you just not knowing what happened to your sister, brother, cousin, whoever, and then years later you finally. I'm sure there's like a weight lifted off their shoulder where there's a level of closure.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Like those families, even if like now they at least know what happened to their family member,
Mhm.
because for possibly 40 something years it was just, well, did they fall off the face of the earth and just
Right.
go start a new family, or Did they get kidnapped and sold into sex trafficking? Are they still alive? Are they not still
Mhm.
alive? Did someone murder them? Like, you
Did
have
they
all these questions.
overdose?
Yeah, like
Right.
there's a plethora of questions that you could be asking because
The
I hate to
lifestyle
say it,
that
but
they lived.
nobody really ever disappears. You have
Mhm.
to be somewhere. There's no such thing as a
Mhm.
person who, like, yes, they call it disappearing, but realistically, in real terms, you cannot just poof vanish off the face of the earth. You're
It's
somewhere. We just don't
it's
know where.
and unfortunately, it be this or that because unfortunately, that's just after someone has been missing for so long. You hear more about cases where they've been missing so long and now they're just looking for a body versus they've been missing for 15, 20 years and they actually turn up. That's more rare than they've been missing and
Well, because after a certain amount of years, they literally just pronounce you dead.
mhm,
Like, so say you have an insurance policy or something. After so many years of you being missing, they pronounce you legally dead
mhm,
and you're able to cash out on that insurance policy.
mhm. Yep. Sad, sad all the way around.
Yeah.
Sad for even just again the way his life started off. I mean, just from then on, really.
Yeah. That's why I'm very much pro choice.
I feel you. I feel you. I feel you.
Some people don't need kids.
Don't
I
need
know
them.
that sounds shitty, but some people don't
Nah,
need kids.
you ain't lying.
You know you can't take care of them.
You ain't lying.
But that was the story of Samuel Little. I hope that you enjoyed listening and finding out about Samuel. So, thanks for being a guest on my podcast. Don't worry, guys, this isn't the end. We're going to do an actual exit. So, keep listening. Okay, guys, that one was a doozy. 93 victims is
Mm,
crazy.
mm.
But I just want to thank Fatima for being on my podcast. She just knows how much I love her and how much I appreciate her.
Aw.
Um, like I said in the beginning, I use her as a free therapist sometimes. So if you need her as a therapist, don't call her. She's not going to answer.
Or my phone is dead. One of the two.
Fun fact, me and Fatima both have issues with charging our phones. So if you personally know us and we literally don't answer your phone calls, it's because A, our phones are on do not disturb, or B, we simply did not charge our phones. And that is true for both of us.
It's very true. It's
We
very,
are
very
one
true.
person, different font.
We really are. We really are. You know you're my
But
little sister.
you're my sister
Hearts.
too. Oh
Mhm.
my gosh, she literally sends hearts. That's
Did you
cool.
see that? Oh my
Yes.
god.
Okay, y'all can't see this because it's not recording, but she made a heart and I made a heart and mine didn't do the little heart thing, but hers did. I think it's because we're on different like computer systems. But
Yeah.
anyway, just so this isn't too long. Thank you guys so much for listening to my podcast. If you did get this far, make sure you like and subscribe and sign up for that email list. And every single thing that I said I was going to drop in the description, I'm going to go back and listen to this when I'm going to go back and listen. Has nothing to do while I'm laughing at you guys. I'm going to go back and listen to this when I edit it all together. And I am going to put every single thing that I said that I would put in the description with all the links for you guys. So you can go search more into Samuel Little because if you're like me, you hadn't heard of him before you listened to this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And he killed 93 people. So you need to
Mm-hmm.
hear from him.
Mm-hmm.
So, once again, thanks, guys. Like I always say, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay suspicious. We're out.
That's it. That's a wrap.